Let me read a text to you. Philemon, it's only one chapter, verse 6. The only one we're going to look at on screen today. Says this, that the communication of your faith may become effectual by the acknowledging of every good thing which is in you in Christ Jesus. I love this passage of Scripture. I don't know that I have favorites because I get into trouble if I try to isolate myself to favorite passages. But this one really speaks to me, and there's some things that jump out to me. That the sharing of your faith, Paul says, may become effectual. Anybody want to be effective in their life for Jesus? I want to be effective. And he tells you how to do this or how to begin doing this. And he says you begin to be effective in the sharing of your faith by acknowledging every good thing that's on the inside of you that Jesus has placed there. You've got some good things on the inside of you. Turn to someone sitting next to you or around you, maybe in front of you or behind you. Find someone and say, you've got some good stuff. Go ahead and tell them, please. Please tell them. You've got some good stuff. You've got some good stuff. Now, I think a natural inclination is to kind of brush that off, to be dismissive of that perhaps. But I take this very seriously because he says to us that the way we become effective is by acknowledging all the good things that are on the inside of us, which assumes in order to acknowledge it, you've got to know that it's there. You can't acknowledge it if you don't see it, if you don't know it, if you're not aware of it, right? Pretty simple. And so this whole series is going to be with the heart and with the mindset to reveal to each of us the good things that God's placed on the inside of us. And I've titled this series, Your Blank Matters. Your blank matters. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in that blank each week with a key thought, idea, gift, spiritual component of who you are so that we can acknowledge the good that's been placed in us and watch our faith become effective by acknowledging it. I think you would probably agree that we live in a world that's very quick to acknowledge the negative. In conversations, it's easy to drift to the problems. For most of us, it's easy to identify issues or challenges or struggles. But this says that when we acknowledge the good that's in us, that's when we become effective in sharing our faith. So today, I'm going to fill in that blank for you. Your blank matters, and start with something quite simple, and it's this. Your yes matters. Your YES matters. I want to reflect on this single word, yes. In the gospel, and in the gospels, time and time again, we're presented with moments when individuals are confronted with a choice to say yes to Jesus or to say no. To turn away or to follow. Their choices made a difference. Our choices make a difference. Their yes mattered. Our yes matters. Some brief examples. Before we do that, I want the chair. Is it okay if I just relax and chill out for a minute? I just want to talk to you. I don't want to make this more difficult than it needs to be. The family series was kind of a thrust of challenge. Did you feel the challenge in the family series? This is just going to be about how great God is and how much He wants to do in you. So this might be a kind of fill you up, run around the room, shout, dance, clap, and maybe flirt with Pentecostal, charismatic reactions in a church experience. Hey. If it gets real crazy, Matt will have to give me my hanky. It'll be wild, all right? So, examples, some examples of yes in the Gospels, just really briefly. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they were simple fishermen, yet when Jesus came to them by the Sea of Galilee and said, "Follow me," they left everything with a big resounding yes and followed him. And their yes made a difference because they became, and Peter specifically became, the pillar of the church. What if Peter says no? Jesus uses somebody else. I've told you this story before that I was feeling a little insecure, a little inadequate. I don't know if you've ever felt that recently, but it's not really comfortable. I was feeling that around my calling, around my assignment, around this mission. And I was just kind of lamenting, complaining, and calling it prayer. Anybody ever done that? You ever complained and said you were praying? I was doing that and saying, God, I really just don't feel up to this task. And I remember thinking, there's no way I was your first choice. Certainly you could have found somebody smarter, probably not better looking, but you could have found someone with less ego. You could have found somebody better. There's no way I was your first choice. And I remember, I'm not saying I heard a voice, but I remember getting a response. I said, Lord, there's no way I was your first choice. And he said, you weren't. That's encouraging, isn't it? He said, you weren't my first choice. You were the first one to say yes. I don't know if Peter was Jesus' first choice. He said yes pretty quick. And saying all that, our yes matters. It mattered upstream of Peter. It mattered downstream of Peter. Matthew, a tax collector, which is a frowned upon vocation. Not much has changed in a couple thousand years. He was called by Jesus, and he rose and followed, and his yes led to him being one of the 12 apostles and a writer of one of the Gospels. Mary Magdalene, what shall you say except to say that her past was tumultuous, controversial. Seems as though the jury is out exactly on who Mary Magdalene was, but she was not in the upper echelon and choice individuals of culture and society. And she became one of the closest disciples and was the first to see him after the resurrection. That was on the other side of her yes. Some examples of no in the gospel. The crowd in Nazareth, when Jesus proclaimed the scriptures in his own hometown, they tried to kill him. Not a great debut. They literally tried to take him and throw him off the cliff. That isn't exactly my experience in my hometown, but that was Jesus' experience. They were like, what are they saying? I don't know that there's a louder no than trying to hurl somebody to their death off a cliff. And what happened with their no? That whole crowd missed their visitation time of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords that we sang about. The chief priests and Pharisees, all the religious people, despite witnessing the miracles and hearing the authoritative teaching, many chose to not believe him, and in fact, their no turned into the crucifixion. Their no was rooted in some things that I think is worth paying attention to, because I believe that their no and our no have the same roots system. And I think that three things that are worth paying attention to are, we arrive at no, N-O, with God, usually because of three things, maybe more. Fear, pride, and tradition. Fear, pride, and tradition often lead us to a spiritual, religious no. The chief priests were afraid of Jesus' influence. They arrived at no. There are things that we're afraid of that cause us to arrive at a no. So you're talking about a giving proposition. Fear that you just won't have enough, that it'll run out, will lead you to a no. Fear of all kinds of things can cause you to conclude that no is the better answer. Pride, thinking that we know better than God, causes us to arrive at a no. I'm certain that there isn't anyone in this room during this service, someone maybe online but not in the room, has ever thought you knew more than God about what you should do next. So let me describe what that looks like for the people in here who's never experienced it before. It's talking back to him. It's wavering in your mind. It's, should we really? It really goes back, way back. There's a beautiful picture of it in Genesis when the enemy comes to Eve and Adam. I can't remember offhand which one, but the serpent's question, I think to Eve was, did God really say? Is this really what we're supposed to do? Pride and ego get involved and cause us to arrive at a no. Tradition, the way we've always done it. We've never done it this way before, so we can't do it now. They had always done their religious duty a certain way, and so when God answered by his son, they couldn't see it because tradition had blinded them. And what I want to encourage someone in the room about is that we should regularly be saying a new yes to God. A new yes. An old yes might not cut it in a new environment. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is maybe you said yes about something weeks, months, or years ago, and God's moved on since then, and you're still champion. I said yes, I said yes, I said yes. You said yes when bell bottoms were still in fashion. It's time to change and get a new yes. You know, come on, somebody. A regular new yes. Someone says, well, I'm just waiting for bell bottoms to come back around. No. A new yes. A refreshed yes. Can I move on from fear, pride, and tradition? Someone say, please do. The other individual, one specific individual that is an example of a no in the Gospels is someone that we call the rich young ruler. And in Matthew 19, we see this story unfold. And it comes down to this, that Jesus tells him to sell everything that he has. No one's asking you to sell anything this morning. Jesus pinpointed where the young man's line was, trying to get him to a new yes, but he stayed stuck on no. Let me read part of it to you, just so you can have it in your hearing. Now, behold, one came and said to him, good teacher, what good thing? Everybody say good. What good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? And so he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is God. I think it's interesting here that until you know God, you don't really know what good is. And so you might be saying yes to something that's good, that you think is good, but isn't God. Because until you really know who God is and the God of the Word is, you can't get to a yes on God just by nice, your own interpretation of good. You must know God, and then you'll know what He defines as is good. He goes on and he says this, but if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. He, the young man, says, which ones? Can you see he's playing games? No? You ever had this with kids? Did you do your chores? Which ones? What do you know? They didn't do none. They're trying to get you to reduce down to the common denominator of the one that's most important to you so they can do the least amount. Which ones? And Jesus says, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man said to him, all these I've kept. No freaking way, guys. No freaking way he kept all those. No way. So he's got something going on in his heart, and Jesus gets right to it. He doesn't argue with him. And Jesus says to him this, if you want to be perfect, go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Come and follow me. Gives him two things to do. Sell everything and follow him. He found his line. He wasn't ready to give a new yes. Jesus is challenging him to a new yes. Let's just make the assumption that he was telling the truth. I find that highly unlikely, but let's say that the young man is telling the truth and he kept all those things. Jesus is giving him an opportunity to say a new yes. What's the new yes in front of you? What's the stirring inside? And watch what the young man, it said that happens to him. But when the young man heard that saying, when he heard the call to a new yes, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. He arrived at a no. Jesus was trying to get him to a yes. Notice this. Jesus is not after his resources. He's not after his stuff. He's after his heart. Because it's with the heart that a person believes. It's in the heart that you say yes. Abraham said yes. When God called Abraham, he said yes, and it was credited to him righteousness. Mary, the mother of Jesus, said yes, and her answer was, behold, I'm the servant of the Lord. The blessings promised are described in a verse that has shaped and molded much of my life in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 19. Here's what it says. If you, everybody say, that's me. That was weak. Okay. That's me. Praise the Lord. Thank you, brother, my man. If I'm willing and obedient, I'll eat the good of the land, is what the biblical promise is. Notice there are two qualifications for biblical promises: willingness and obedience. That means when you say yes, you need to mean it. Not one of these passive-aggressive spiritual yeses. When you say yes to get somebody off your back, but really mean no. Remember the text that says, let your yes be yes and your no be no? This says, if you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land. How many like the idea of the good of the land? I like that idea. I'm glad it's there. I'm not always excited about the qualifications to get there. But I'm a guy that believes that God is the owner of everything, and there is nothing that I will ever have need of that He will have a problem getting into my hands so that I can serve Him better. He owns it all. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns it all. It's all His. And He says that the good of the land is the biblical promise to everyone who is willingly obedient. But what I've been guilty of, and maybe you have too, is unwilling obedience. I do it, but I don't want to. I give you a really carnal, everyday example. I've washed dishes and not wanted to. I've unwillingly been obedient to the house rules. But you know what's crazy? My wife is crazy. But I'm crazy. You're all crazy, right? We're all crazy. We're all weird and crazy on some level. And the fact that you don't realize it is even crazier than the fact that we're all crazy, right? So here's the crazy thing about my wife. My wife does not just want me to do the dishes. I'm about to get big amens from the ladies in the room. She doesn't want me just to do the dishes. She wants me to want to do the dishes. Hey, am I telling the truth? She doesn't just want me to. And I know I'm stereotyping and I'm gender whatevering, but in my house, this is how it goes, okay? Because I've complained enough about these certain tasks that women are supposed to do. Relax, I'm teasing. Not my fault. She's better at it than me. Thank you. I've just really divided the room. Some people have left. Some people have logged off online. I've only got 5 minutes. Daniel, come and help me. Played some music so I get out of this debacle that I put myself in. But the point stands. Don't get lost in the playfulness. She wants me to want to, right? And vice versa. With all of our relationships, you have certain things in your relationships where you don't want people begrudgingly doing things. I don't think. I don't think that in the highest form of relationship, we're satisfied when an individual just does it because they're bullied into submission. And the highest level of relationship that ought to concern us as human beings is our relationship with our Creator. And He says that if you're willing and obedient, you'll eat the good of the land, that you'll have the best that is provided. In other words, when you say yes and you mean it, it opens the floodgates for biblical promises. But keep reading with me and watch what happens. He contrasts this. If you're willing and obedient, you eat the good of the land. Woo! But if you refuse and rebel, that's no. If you refuse and rebel, you'll be devoured. Watch how he ends it and punctuates it. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. What's that mean? It means you ain't changing this with your vote, with your opinion, with my belief system. It's this simple, ladies and gentlemen. Our yes to God leads to blessing, and our no leads to curse. And we're choosing. We're making that choice. If you're willing and obedient, you eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you be devoured. The mouth of the Lord has said it this way. There's no sense in arguing with God. You can try. I've tried. It doesn't work. What's the yes that He needs you to get to? Let me give you 3 things as I finish. Is it okay? Can I give you just 3 more things? I might tell a story. But I'm almost done. I mean, you all got up and got ready and purdied yourself and everything. You're not in a rush, I don't think, right? I don't want to rob you. I don't want to wear you out either. Write down these 3 things if you're taking notes. If you're online, I'd love for you to put this in the comment section if you're still following along. YES. This is corny a little bit, but I think it'll stick in your mind. You can write it vertically. YES. Here's what a yes to God involves in my mind. Much more than this, but to punctuate that your yes matters. Here's what a yes is. Number 1, it's yielding. That's the Y. Number 2, it's expecting. That's the E. And number 3, it's saying. That's the S. Yielding to God's will, expecting His promises, and saying what He said about your life. That involves you digging into this book and finding out what He said about you and saying that over your life. We've got materials in Connect Central that are things that he's said about who you are as a new creation, who you are in him. That'd be a great place to start. Yielding, expecting, saying. Who or what are you yielding to? Yield means to submit, which is a really great word that's been contaminated. But it means to submit means to defer to the thoughts and ideas and ways of another. So you don't always have to wait for God's idea to line up with your idea. Just yield to his. I've noticed something in driving that we confuse two words in our traffic patterns that we also confuse spiritually. We confuse the word yield with merge. Merge is the action of integrating one's vehicle from one lane into another. Whereas yield indicates that you give way to the oncoming or ongoing or current traffic flow. And here's the spiritual confusion that I see. What I see is that in merge, that you take your ideas and that traffic pattern that you're integrating with is God's ways, and you try to impose yours in his. You try to merge those two together, when the best case scenario is that you realize that God's ways are higher than your ways, and you just yield and give way to him and let him do his thing. That you really, when you yield, you're ensuring that you don't interfere with their movement. And that if you need to, you'll come to a full stop when you yield in order to be a part of that new traffic flow. The rich young ruler had a chance to yield, but he was trying to merge. Hey, I've done all these things. Do I get credit for these other rules that I've followed? Jesus is like, no, we ain't merging here. We yielded. That's all fine. Good, fine. There's one thing you're missing. He was saying yield. We're not going to integrate. That's good. And for some, maybe today's a fresh, clean slate. You need to realize, hey, you know what? All my cumulative yeses have been awesome, and they've been wonderful, and I've done them as unto the Lord. But it feels like to me that for many of us, it's a brand new season and a time for a whole bunch of new yeses. To feel as though you step into a new season with the Lord and just begin to say yes to all of the things that he's putting on the horizon, the uncomfortable things, the unforeseen things, the unnavigated things. Now you just lean into a great big yes and decide, I'm yielding to God. I'm going to expect his promises, and I'm going to say what he says about me, because here's the truth. Your yes matters. If I can, I want to finish with a story that maybe you've heard before. Last Monday was September the 4th, and that's a significant date to me. It's probably even more important to me than my birthday. September the 4th, 2013, 10 years ago, I had a massive heart attack at the age of 35, 4 days before my 36th birthday, and literally, no exaggeration, almost died. And I'm going to tell you what I believe. What I believe is that by God's grace and some yeses that happened upstream of me in the medical world, because of those yeses and because of God's grace, I'm alive and not dead. I believe that doctors and nurses and caregivers sometimes don't get the credit they deserve because we'll just give God all the credit. Now, I give God lots of credit, right? But it was Dr. Rajub putting a stent in me in an emergency cath lab that Rob Montagnes had spearheaded 5 years earlier. So let's not over-spiritualize this, because there were two people upstream of me that said a yes that matters to me. And now I think it matters to other people, because I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think I'm better alive than dead. I believe that. And I believe you are too. 2008, if memory serves me correct, Rob Montagnes, and I might be wrong on the details of this, but I think I'm correct. He and I have chatted about this. He spearheaded an initiative to bring the first emergency heart cath lab to a rural hospital, Licking Memorial. And in 2013, as I'm being admitted to the hospital with heart issues, had he not said yes, I would have never stabilized, and they would have held my hand as I died in that hospital, barring any miraculous intervention beyond the medical one. There was also a decision to bring Dr. Rajub in as a cardiologist, who I've jokingly and maybe flirting with heresy said, he's saved more people in Licking County than Jesus has. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but he's done amazing work. Those two yeses were natural answers that I needed at that moment in my life, before I knew I had a need. And there are a lot of yeses that would be interesting to investigate in your own life. What yeses others had made that made a way for you. I'm illustrating, just let me keep hammering on this nail. Your yes matters. Your yes matters. Your yes matters. You may never know what your yes has done, but it matters. And there have been people upstream of you who said yes so that we could be in this space. You might not ever meet them, but they said yes for us to do this. And the reason why I'm asking you to say a new yes is way off into the future, your yes today is going to make a difference. And part of faith is saying yes when you can't see how it makes a difference. You're planting a seed today when internally, I can almost feel it. I'm kind of an intuitive guy at times, and I can feel some things clicking for people. And you don't even know what you're saying yes to, but your mindset and your heart is just kind of shifted in the room and the environment, and God's doing his thing, and you're like, I don't know, ready or not, Jesus, here I come. I'm ready to say yes, and I don't even know what I'm going to say yes to, but I'm going to say yes in advance before you even ask me, because if God asks me to do it, then my default ought to be yes, even if it scares the fire out of me, which almost every new yes will. I can just sense in the room and online that some people are getting to a yes. It's changing your heart. Some bitterness is leaving. Some resentment is lifting. Some anxiety is evaporating. Those individuals and whoever else was upstream of that decision said yes. My wife's yes mattered when we started this church. I was committed to not starting it alone. We did it together. Her yes mattered. And in that hospital room, as I'm bearing down in pain, and they're trying to get the electrodes on me. I don't know if you've ever seen these electrodes. I don't know what they're called. That might not be right. They're these great big pads. They're probably, I'd say they're legitimately that size. They were trying, and they're full of some super adhesive that pulls off hair and layers of skin to the point that it'll make all of us scream and yell. I instantly, I don't know why I instantly broke out in such a sweat. They couldn't even get them to stick to me. They were sliding around. And there were nurses and caregivers holding them on me, which I think meant they were going to get a residual effect if they had to hit the button. I'm not positive, but I mean, it makes sense that they were susceptible to that, and they were willing to say yes to that anyway. And I looked at my wife when I opened my eyes. She said these words, I'll never forget them as long as I live. Whenever I do die, I'm positive these will be the last things that go through my mind. She says to me, Josh, you're the strongest person I know. And I'm convinced that that got me through. Because the last thing I remember seeing as I laid on that table, is it okay if I reminisce? The last thing I remember seeing as I was on that cold metal slab was this massive flat screen monitor. And it had my heart rate. And my heart rate was 240 beats per minute. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a heart rate. That's a vibration. I Googled it later, and I was like, is that even possible? Was I seeing stuff? And I Googled, and it said, because everything Google says is correct. It said that elite athletes, like Olympic type athletes, under the care of a physician during training can get their heart rate sometimes up to 300 beats a minute. As you can see, this is not the physique of an Olympic athlete. Strongest person I know. A doctor and a president of a hospital saying yes. The sermon's over, but like my mind gets stuck on like time travel. Like follow Dr. Rajoub's life from Syria. Why did he go in the medical field? What led him to those steps? Like all of the yeses that caused us to converge in this room, they're just freaking miraculous. I mean, my grandparents immigrating to the United States from a little European country called Italy. Like we're a 7-day boat ride away from never meeting. For all of us to converge with all of these yeses, it matters. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if I've made the point or not, but your yes and my yes matters. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Our yes matters. And I don't know what it's going to lead to, but I think about little baby Dr. Rajoub in Syria. Because like he was a kid with all kinds of stuff going on. I know because we've had conversations. He loves soccer. What if he would have been a world-class soccer player instead of a cardiologist? Like all the what ifs lead us to the steps. I believe this, Our steps are ordered by God. And let's just say yes to everything that he puts in front of us with no reserve, no thought of returning, with no feelings of regret, and watch what God does. Y'all glad you came to church today? Y'all glad you watched online today? Every time we say yes, we align ourselves with his divine plan and purpose for our life. And each yes leads us to a closer step to our destiny and deeper into his heart. I want you all to remember this. Every time God calls, your yes matters.